We have this story from NBC News. This is kind of crazy. Drone strikes hit Moscow in first attack on Russian capital's residential areas since Ukraine war began. Once again, no one knows exactly who's responsible. Russia, of course, says it's the Kiev regime attacking civilian targets, while the West says that it's a Russian false flag intended to bolster public support for war in Russia. Here's why I think that's less likely. The attack was on a wealthy area of Moscow. If you attack poor people, you generate support for war. If you attack rich people, the rich people come after rich people in the establishment elite say like, hey, stop this. Our wealth is being destroyed because of it. It's also possible the idea is to attack the rich people because the rich people will then be like, we want war now. But the rich people were always part of the regime, the political establishment in Russia. So they're typically in line already.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if the elite are going to pull off some kind of false flag, it would make much more sense for them to go after people who are lower status and don't have as much power to fight back against them.
Yeah.
World War III?
Drink.
I don't know.
I think that what our entire media needs to do is speak about this as aggressively as possible without considering the consequences.
What do you mean?
No, I'm being facetious because that's what that's what they've been doing, right? We were talking about this earlier when Lindsey Graham, like a year and a half ago, got on the BBC and literally called for Putin's assassination. I mean, people will come after figures in new media for saying something slightly offensive and say, well, these content creators just aren't responsible enough. I mean, an American politician was on television calling for the assassination of the leader of a nation which is armed with nuclear weapons, and that was just allowed to happen.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's.
I mean, we've the media and political class's rhetoric surrounding this has been insanely irresponsible.
Yeah, thank you. Responsible. It's important to be responsible, even right now, us talking about this, because there's a lot of people listening, and this is like sensitive. You know, I don't think it's a false flag. What?
Then a dozen or so drones attacked civilians.
Drone warfare.
Yep.
21st century warfare. We see the tip of the spear right now.
Attacked civilians. I think it makes sense that Kiev did this more so than Russia false flagged it.
Or some could even been some independent.
If Russia was going to do it right, trying to fan the flames of war between all factions.
Yeah.
But I feel like if Russia was going to do a false flag, they wouldn't target their elites, and it would be more sophisticated than a few drones that failed to do any real damage.
Yeah.
The real issue, I think, is that Kiev wants to send terror to the civilians and destabilize public opinion.
Definitely. I think that's what it is. It's also like kind of a tit for tat thing because they've been shelling different parts of like Ukraine as well, including the attack on Kiev.
I don't think it's tit for tat. I think it's more so you want to force the enemy to retreat, to start. You put them on defense instead of offense.
Right.
But if this is legitimate attack, or whether or not, even if it's not, I think we're now moving very seriously close towards a nuclear war. Because Vladimir Putin said he would use nukes if there was an existential threat to Russia. And now Russian civilians are being attacked.
And the United States has done nothing to promote diplomacy.
He's not going to lose that war.
Right.
He has nukes. And he's not the kind of guy that's like, well, I would win, but I just don't want to use my nukes. Like, it's not how it works.
Dude, when the USSR fell, what the United States promised is that we would not expand NATO an inch eastward. And all we have done is expand NATO eastward in that entire time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying what Putin has done is by any means good, but what I am saying is our failure to behave diplomatically on the global stage bears some responsibility for what's happening here, right? You can't just put this all on crazy, bad Russian man.
Dude.
The United States had a duty to behave responsibly on the foreign stage, and we consistently have not.
I remember watching like maybe like almost 10 years ago. I think we might have been like a Vice piece. I don't remember what it was, but I was watching years and years ago. It was Putin speaking, saying like the West is aggressing. The West has all these new positions out of Russia now, and that's only born to be true now that he's actually in the situation. That we are in the situation. It's just, yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird that we are finally here years and years since then. So
do you think this is like holdover of fear of like the Soviet Union? Like no, I'm not blaming Hillary, like whoever, but like people from that generation are like they're actually afraid of the Soviet Union communism.
In Ukraine, many people are.
Yeah.
Well, I think that with this, I mean, Russia has in the 20th century faced what up to this point, 3 serious existential crises in the United States, and Germany has been involved with all of them. And so NATO, which is basically the United States and Germany, starts inching closer and closer towards Russia's borders. I mean, there was no sensitivity on our part in saying, okay, even if our intentions are good, let's pretend that they were, and we can guarantee that our intentions were good. Maybe we need to be very careful and sensitive about how we go about this so that a hot war between Russia and Ukraine doesn't begin. But no, we did what we did. We mercilessly ridiculed and insulted Russia throughout the entirety of Trump's presidency because the media wanted to scapegoat somebody for Trump's election, and they couldn't just directly hate on the American people because that would be bad for their optics.
Yeah, I think if anything, that might have been born of people that were born in like the era of the Cold War. They wanted to blame Russia, and make Russia seem as if they were still the Soviet Union, when in reality, it's far from the case.
Well, and remember back in 2012 when Mitt Romney, of course it was Mitt Romney, said that Russia was going to be one of the primary existential threats to the United States in coming years, and everyone laughed at him, and now everyone's agreeing with him. We should have kept laughing at him.
Right.
And I know people are saying, how could you argue that when Russia's in a hot war with Ukraine right now? Part of the reason Russia is in a hot war with Ukraine right now is because the United States has been reckless. And there's this idea of speaking softly and carrying a big stick. What the United States has done is we've spoken very loudly about a lot of these things, and we've spoken very inappropriately about them. What was interesting about Donald Trump is, even though to some extent he kept the peace, didn't start any new wars, Putin didn't invade while Trump was president. He waited until there was a man with dementia in the Oval Office before he decided to invade. When Trump was in office, there's a good argument to be made that in some sense he was very heavy-handed with Putin in terms of the threats he made to him, at least according to what Trump has said. What happened was Trump knew that in order to guarantee the peace, even though diplomacy was necessary, there were moments where harshness was also necessary.
The big red button had to work.
And there is something about that. And there is something about the fact that Biden and the left, they either have no idea where those lines are, or they just don't care. And I suspect it's the latter.
Yeah, I think so. Trump had the big stick, but he spoke loudly, but he had the big stick. Biden speaks loudly, but he's got a wet noodle.
Well, I think there's truth in that, but I also think it depends on how we're defining speaking loudly, because even though Trump, look, he had a lot of nerve. He walked right into North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un. This is a guy who, while he was being even somewhat brash and abrasive, was still pursuing peace.